Opening. The voice starts deep, a little tired and reflective, then shifts to determined conviction. I stood there, under the scorching Oakhaven Valley sun, staring down at my cracked, bone-dry irrigation ditch. My heart was pounding, not just from the heat, but from a chilling panic. My well, the one that had sustained this Cedar Creek farm through 3 generations of droughts, was empty. My wheat was dying on the vine, and my livestock were thirstier than dogs in a desert, just staring at me like I owed them an apology, or maybe a miracle. My water was vanishing, plain and simple, like a ghost in the night. And when a farmer loses his water midsummer, it stops being about the weather. It becomes a crime. And I knew what I had to do. I had to find the thief. And when I did, they were going to pay. Literally. It all started maybe 6 weeks back when I first noticed my well's water pressure just dropping, like someone had turned on a giant spigot somewhere. At first, I thought, just the summer heat. But then it got worse. My drip system barely put out a pathetic trickle, and the sight of my cattle standing around empty troughs, occasionally looking at each other in confusion, just breaks your heart. I called Old Man Tiberius, the only plumber left in the county, a grumpy old guy who just mumbled to himself while I followed him around like a lost puppy. After an hour of crawling under the ground, he scratched his chin and declared, "Ain't no leak, son. You got yourself a thief, pulling water right off your property." A thief? Who in their right mind steals water from a farm? Then I stopped, and one name popped into my head with terrifying clarity: Cynthia Albright. My darling neighbor, the woman who'd been a thorn in my side since the day she moved in. She complained about the smell of my manure, the noise of my rooster at dawn, the sheer tackiness of my barn. She was the kind of person who'd flash a sugary smile at your face, but would report you to the Homeowners Association, HOA, for existing too loudly. And recently, her backyard had gotten an upgrade, a ridiculously lush, perpetually green lawn, a massive koi pond, and a ridiculous 3-tiered water fountain, gushing like it was the Palace of Versailles in the middle of a drought. I had my suspect, but I needed proof, hard proof. The next morning, I got up before dawn and followed the main water line from my well. I crawled through bushes, over fences, and right past the back of my barn, where I noticed something strange. A section of the underground pipe had been tampered with. My jaw clenched as I followed a brand-new PVC pipe, clumsily disguised with a layer of mulch and decorative rock. The closer I got to her property line, the more obvious it became. The pipe led straight into Cynthia's yard, like my well was her personal luxury spring water supply. The audacity, the sheer mind-numbing gall. I stood there, hands on my hips, staring at the crime scene, where instead of my water, there was just my stolen supply flowing freely into Cynthia's oasis. The rage and the ridicule just wrestled inside me. Who even does this? Who looks at their neighbor's farm and thinks, you know what, that water should be mine? Cynthia Albright was going to regret this. That afternoon, I decided to pay her a visit. I strolled up to her perfectly manicured front yard and rang the doorbell. It took a few seconds, but eventually she opened the door, dressed in a flowing floral dress, holding a glass of iced tea, looking every bit the queen of the neighborhood. Her expression was sugary sweet, but her eyes darted around nervously. "Oh, Jake, what a surprise!" "What brings you here?" she chirped. I leaned against her doorframe, pretending to admire the towering water fountain behind her. "Just came to ask if you've noticed anything weird about the water lately." Her smile faltered just a fraction of a second. "The water? Oh, no. We've just been very careful with conservation, you know." She let out a high-pitched, brittle laugh. I raised an eyebrow. "Is that right? Because it looks like your koi fish are getting daily spa treatments, while my cows are looking at me like I owe them an apology." She blinked. "Jake, I really don't know what you're talking about." I studied her for a moment, then grinned. "Well, I guess I'll have to get the authorities involved then. Maybe they can figure out where all my missing water's going." That wiped the fake cheer off her face real quick. Her eyes darted to the side and she licked her lips. Now, Jake, there's no need for that. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding." I let the silence stretch, watching her squirm. I wasn't about to let her off the hook, but I wasn't going to confront her directly yet. No, that would be too easy. Cynthia needed to learn a lesson she'd never forget. That night, under the cover of darkness, I did the dirty work. With a few twists and turns of a wrench, I sealed her little illegal pipeline tight. No more fountains, no more koi pond paradise, no more ridiculously lush green lawn. And I took it a step further, installing a small, discreet security camera aimed right at the buried connection spot. If she tried to mess with it again, I'd have the hard evidence. The next morning, the screams started from across the fence. I heard Cynthia's shriek of horror, followed by frantic shouting. "What is happening?" I sipped my coffee on my porch, watching the show unfold. Cynthia stomped outside, staring at her dried-up fountain like someone had just stolen her soul. Her sprinklers wouldn't turn on, her koi pond had stopped refilling, and her lawn was already starting to brown under the sun's unforgiving heat. I waited. Sure enough, a few minutes later, Cynthia stormed over, her face red and sweaty, her designer sandals kicking up dust as she marched up my driveway. "Jake!" she bellowed. I set my mug down, leaning back in my chair. "Morning, Cynthia. What's got you so worked up?" She crossed her arms. "Something's wrong with my water. It's just stopped," I pretended to think. "Huh. Weird coincidence, seeing as I've been having water problems, too." Her eyes twitched. "Jake, be serious. My fountain isn't working. My koi fish need water, and my plants are dying. What am I supposed to do?" I took a long, slow sip of my coffee. "Maybe call a plumber?" She gaped at me like I'd suggested she sacrifice her firstborn. "A plumber? But that'll cost a fortune," I smiled. "Yeah, probably." She huffed, muttering under her breath as she stomped away. I watched her go, feeling the first taste of sweet, sweet justice. But this was only the beginning. Cynthia thought she could steal my water without consequences? Oh, she was about to learn that messing with a farmer's livelihood comes with a price. And it was going to be more expensive than she ever imagined. The morning after cutting off Cynthia's stolen water supply, I woke up feeling like a king. There was something deeply satisfying about knowing justice had started working its way through the system, even if Cynthia didn't realize it yet. I had barely finished my first sip of coffee when I heard her outside, losing her mind. It was even better than I had hoped. I watched from my porch as she stomped around her yard, shaking her fist at her dried-up fountain like it had personally betrayed her. Her once pristine koi pond was now a sad puddle, the expensive fish flopping around as she scrambled to fill it with a garden hose that wasn't working. She paced back and forth, clutching her phone, probably calling every plumber in town. It wasn't long before a white van pulled up and a man in overalls stepped out looking half asleep. Cynthia practically dragged him to her backyard, waving her arms wildly as she explained the disaster. I sat back enjoying the show. It didn't take long before the plumber started shaking his head, pointing at the ground, and telling her something she definitely didn't want to hear. Her shriek carried across the yard. "What do you mean there's no connection to the city water line? That's impossible!" I could see the plumber scratching his head, trying to figure out why this lady was acting like she had lost her life savings instead of just some stolen water. He said something else, and Cynthia's expression shifted from rage to something that almost looked like panic. She started pointing toward my property, her voice rising in pitch. Ah, there it was. The moment she tried to shift the blame. I took another sip of coffee. This was going to be good. A few minutes later, Cynthia stormed across the yard and right up to my porch. Her face was red, whether from anger or the heat, I wasn't sure, but judging by the way she was gripping her phone like she was about to throw it, I was guessing anger was winning. "Jake, I need to talk to you," she snapped, crossing her arms. "Right now." I leaned back in my chair, setting my coffee down slowly. "Morning, Cynthia. You look stressed." She took a deep breath like she was trying to keep herself from exploding. "Something is wrong with my water. My plumber says I don't have a connection to the main line, which is ridiculous. I need you to tell me if you did something." I blinked. "Me? Why would I do something?" She let out a laugh, but there was no humor in it. "Oh, come on, Jake. We both know my water was working just fine yesterday." Now all of a sudden, nothing. What are the chances? I shrugged. "Well, considering how much water you were using, maybe you just ran out." Her mouth opened and closed, her brain clearly short-circuiting at the idea. This isn't funny. My plants are dying, my fish are suffocating, and do you have any idea how much my property value will drop if my lawn turns brown? I scratched my chin, pretending to think. Sounds rough, she glared at me. Fix it! I let out a long sigh. Cynthia, I hate to break it to you, but you don't have a legal water connection because you were stealing mine. Her eyes widened, but before she could deny it, I raised a hand. I followed my pipes. You had an illegal tap running straight from my well into your property. That's why your koi fish were practically living better than me while my farm was drying up. Her jaw tightened. That is a ridiculous accusation. I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen a few times before holding it up. There, clear as day, was the video footage from my security camera showing the pipe running from my well straight into her yard. Cynthia's face drained of color. You can't prove I did that, she stammered. I raised an eyebrow. Doesn't matter who did it. Your property, your responsibility. And since you were the only one benefiting from it, I'd say that makes you guilty. She gritted her teeth, looking like she wanted to scream. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and let out a forced chuckle. Okay, look, let's not get dramatic. Maybe this was all just a misunderstanding. I'm sure we can work something out, I smirked. Oh, we're definitely working something out. See, I could report this illegal water theft. Pretty serious stuff. The fines alone would be in the thousands, maybe even legal trouble. Her face twitched. But you wouldn't do that, right? We're neighbors, I chuckled. Neighbors don't steal from each other. She let out a nervous laugh, shifting her weight. Okay, so, how much do you want? I tilted my head. Excuse me? How much to make this go away? She asked, voice low. I'll pay you. Just name your price, I pretended to think. Well, let's see. I lost weeks of irrigation, my crops suffered, my animals suffered, and I had to pay a plumber to come out for no reason. And then there's the principle of the thing. So how about you cover my losses? I'd say, 5,000 should do. Her eyes nearly popped out of her head. 5,000? That's insane. I crossed my arms. You know what else is insane? Stealing water. She let out a frustrated noise, pacing back and forth. That's robbery! I shrugged. If you prefer, I can take this to the HOA and the authorities. But something tells me they'll be a lot less reasonable than me. She stared at me for a long time, her jaw working as if she was chewing on the reality of her situation. Finally, with a defeated sigh, she muttered, Fine, I grinned. Pleasure doing business with you. By the end of the day, Cynthia had transferred the money to my account, grumbling the whole time. But her problems weren't over yet, not even close. The HOA got involved the next week. Cynthia tried to save face, claiming she was the victim, but my video evidence spoke louder than any excuse she could come up with. They slapped her with a hefty fine for violating neighborhood regulations, adding even more financial pain on top of what she already owed. And to make things worse for her, word spread fast in the community. The woman who had spent so much time trying to portray herself as the queen of the neighborhood was now the town joke. Cynthia had wanted to steal my water without consequence. Instead, she had drained her own wallet, ruined her reputation, and turned herself into the laughingstock of the HOA. And the best part? I was just getting started. Cynthia thought her suffering was over after paying me off and dealing with the HOA fine, but she had no idea that karma was just getting started. Cutting off her water supply was just the beginning. Now she had to live with the consequences of her actions, and I had a front-row seat to her downfall. The first sign of her empire crumbling was the state of her yard. Without my stolen water feeding her ridiculous fountains and oversized lawn, her once pristine property was starting to show the truth. The grass, which had been unnaturally green for months, turned brown in patches, then yellow, then completely dead. Her koi pond, which had been the pride of her backyard, became a glorified mud hole. The expensive fish she had paraded around as a status symbol had to be rehomed. And I heard from a neighbor that she had to pay someone to haul them away. That alone must have been humiliating for her. The fountain was the next to go. I remember stepping out onto my porch one morning, coffee in hand, as Cynthia and some poor landscapers stood staring at the dry, useless structure. The man kept shaking his head while Cynthia flailed her arms, clearly arguing that there must be a way to bring it back to life. But without a free, endless water supply to steal from, there wasn't much hope. By the end of the week, the fountain was gone, leaving behind an ugly, empty space in her backyard. Her paradise was falling apart piece by piece. She tried everything to keep up appearances. First, she started hauling in jugs of water from the grocery store, hoping to save what was left of her dying plants. That worked for about a week until she realized just how expensive and exhausting it was. I spotted her one evening, dragging gallon after gallon of water from her car, her face red with frustration as she tried to keep her lawn from turning into a desert. It didn't work. The summer heat was relentless, and without a constant water source, her lush landscaping dried up faster than she could save it. Then came the HOA's final blow. While Cynthia had managed to worm her way out of legal trouble, the HOA wasn't about to let her off so easily. Since she had been illegally tapping into my well, they passed a new regulation preventing any homeowner from installing any kind of underground piping without official approval. That meant if Cynthia ever tried to get water from anywhere other than the city's limited supply, she would need permits, inspections, and a hefty fee to even attempt it. She had officially been cut off for good. She tried to fight back, of course. Cynthia wasn't the type to accept defeat gracefully. She called an emergency HOA meeting, trying to rally support from other homeowners, but no one was on her side. Word had spread fast about what she had done, and most of the neighborhood was still laughing about it. The meeting ended with her storming out in frustration, realizing she had lost whatever influence she once had. With no other options, she started looking for a way out. The for sale sign went up in her yard not long after. But the market wasn't exactly in her favor. Nobody wanted to pay top dollar for a house with a dead lawn, no backyard appeal, and an HOA history filled with violations. The best part? The only people interested in buying were fellow farmers like me. And Cynthia absolutely despised the idea of her house being owned by someone she considered beneath her. She tried to hold out, refusing low offers and insisting she would wait for the right buyer. But the longer she waited, the worse things got. Her reputation was already trashed, and with each passing week, her house looked worse. The heat had taken its toll, leaving her yard looking more like a dust field than a garden. Then came the final humiliation. One morning, I noticed a moving truck pulling into her driveway. At first, I thought maybe she had finally found a buyer, but as I watched, I realized she wasn't selling. She was leaving. Cynthia, the woman who had spent months pretending to be the queen of the neighborhood, was packing up and running away. I watched as she and a few movers struggled to load up her overpriced furniture, her designer patio sets, and whatever dignity she had left. She didn't say goodbye to anyone. She just disappeared, like a bad memory fading away. And when the moving truck finally pulled out of the driveway, leaving behind an empty, lifeless house, I let out a long, satisfied breath. The war was over. In the days that followed, her house sat empty, a ghost of what it once was. The once green lawn was now just dirt and weeds. The backyard, which had been her pride and joy, looked abandoned and forgotten. And as the weeks passed, the offers on her house dropped lower and lower, until finally someone bought it for a fraction of what she had originally wanted. And who was the lucky buyer? Me. It wasn't even about revenge at that point. It was about principle. Cynthia had spent so much time trying to ruin my farm, trying to act like she was better than me, and in the end, she had paid me thousands just to leave town. Buying her house was just the final cherry on top. After signing the paperwork, I stood in what was once her pristine backyard, looking around at the dried-up mess she had left behind. It was a fitting end. She had stolen from me, and in the end I had taken back everything plus more. I turned on the hose, letting the water flow freely onto the ground, knowing that for once it was exactly where it was supposed to be. And just like that, the water war was over, ending call to action. The voice shifts to a reflective, inviting tone. My story ends there, but it makes me wonder, who was really right in all this? Did I go too far by making her pay $5,000 and ultimately losing her home? Or was that just raw justice for someone who tried to destroy another person's livelihood? Did I become the villain I hated, or was I just a guy protecting what was mine? Let me know what you think in the comments. Have you ever had to deal with a Cynthia or a Karen in your neighborhood? And if you have, how did you fight back? Share your story. And if you think this one was worth the telling, please like and subscribe so I can bring you more tales of the wonderful neighbors of Oak Haven Valley. See you next time.